What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the film room. I'm your host, Eric Turner. Another Tuesday night, another film room session. And of course, my co host from Disguise Coverage, Anthony, is joining me in the film room. What is going on, Ant?
I'm still a little emotionally distraught and broken after this past week, but it's Thanksgiving, about to have some good food. The Bills play again. We're back in the film room to break down some really great stuff from this past. Well, great depending on what side of the ball or team you were
Sure.
looking at. And then we have a tremendous guest for tonight's show. The comments are already blowing up in regards to it. I am a little nervous though, because now it's me and then two guys with the same name, so I feel like I'm outgunned, but I'm going to power through. But yeah, I'm pumped and excited.
No, it's good to have you back in the film room again. Yes, it's going to be sort of a somber film room. A lot of times we try to, highlight some of the good and some of the bad, but tonight's going to be a lot of the bad. Of course, we're going to examine the run defense of the Buffalo Bills. And, our guest, I've been promoting it all week. Eric Wood, I mean, you guys know him, former Bills offensive lineman, doing big things with the Bills nowadays. He had a guest on this week on his podcast that we'll talk about. Had a guest and author, David Nurse, and he had a clip on Twitter this week, and Nurse was talking about how messages can live forever, and how a lot of different sites and resources, books, magazines, online sites, a lot of the times they regurgitate info, and it made me think. It made me think like that is true when you talk about Bill's content and how at Cover One we try to do it a little differently, and which is why we do it in the film room. And when I wanted to talk about the trenches, of course, I wanted to bring our guy Eric Wood in because he is obviously an expert in this area and domain. So, Eric, welcome back into the film room, man. It's been a few years. I think it's been 3 years or so since we had a film room session with the Athletic, brother.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's good to be back. Pleasure to join you guys.
No, we excited to have you here. And we're going to be talking about the defensive side of the ball, guys. And but I thought it'd be a cool angle to talk with Eric about this because one of the plays that we're going to be dissecting 3 or 4 different times is the trap play, the wham block. And it kind of brought me back to the days when you were playing the tail end of your career, when Greg Roman was there, Anthony Lynn was there, our boy Richie was there, and you guys ran trap with the best of them.
Yeah, we did. We truly did. And it's funny, when we first installed our trap game, we went back to early 90s film and they were teaching the running backs how to run the track like Thurman
Yeah.
Thomas used to run it because he was perfect at running traps. And I'll say this, traps are most effective when you have a good pass game. Back in the day, obviously with Jim Kelly and the weapons they had on the outside, they were constantly getting guys who were penetrating up the field, and then those traps work really well there. Against the wham play, sometimes too much penetration can hurt the play,
Mm-hmm.
but in the last game, the Colts ran them well. And what the Colts have is they have an excellent offensive line, and they've invested heavily into it. They have former #1 overall pick Eric Fisher at left tackle. They have a second-round pick at right tackle and 2 first-rounders at left guard and
Yeah.
center. And that left guard, Quentin Nelson, he's hobbled this year a little bit with that ankle injury. Credit to him for playing through it, though, because a lot of guys who are known at the best in the league at what they do would say, hey, my film isn't living up to what it normally is because of
Yeah.
this ankle injury. He's playing through it and still playing well, just not the Quentin Nelson we're used to seeing.
Yeah, and you saw him gut it out, and there were some reps where the Bills' defensive lineman, got a good power move into him. You could see his balance wasn't all that well with that ankle and everything. So you watch some of the post-game content, especially from the Colts side. Frank Reich with his locker room conversation and speech with the team there. You could tell that this game was circled for the Colts after the playoffs last year. And the Bills, it was pretty obvious that they wanted to shut down, as you said, a really good, complex running game of the Colts. The detail in that run game, in that run scheme is top 5 in the league, in my opinion. And so the Bills, of course, wanted to sell out. They wanted to be aggressive. And as you know, Eric, a lot of times when you have a defense that wants to sell out like that, as you alluded to, one of the ways to do to counter that is with these traps and whams. So what were your thoughts on how the Colts really, forced the corners and some of the secondary players to have to tackle on these plays along the edge, along the perimeter as they bounced outside?
Yeah, that's what you're looking to do when you're an offense. You want to make the guys that are least able to make the tackles have to try and make the tackles. And I say that because, especially with the Colts, a lot of their run plays are underneath center. Well, now you don't have the quarterback to account for. And so you're truly getting 11 on 10 football. And with the running back carrying the ball, you have 11 defenders, only 9 blockers at that point. So you're going to have to leave somebody unaccounted for. And the Colts do a really good job of knowing who they're going to leave unaccounted for. And to your point about this complex run game, I was talking to Frank Reich before the game, and I told him, I said, man, you got one heck of a run game for a former quarterback coaching. And he started laughing. And, I complimented on him on how his team runs the football. It reminds me a lot of Greg Roman's principles. And really give credit to Frank Reich, because in Philly, they aired it out more than they do here. But the strength of their offense is Jonathan Taylor in that offensive line.
Yeah, let's jump into the film now. We got a few clips breaking down some of these traps and wham blocks. So, Anthony, go ahead and take it away.
We started to talk about it a little bit, with Eric. I'm not going to be able to say like Eric, because people are going to be like, which Eric? So Eric Turner, mentioning, how the Colts use that aggressiveness of the Bills against them in this game. And they used these traps and the whams and used angles to crease the defense. They had that element of surprise. It was honestly like a beautiful, in going back and watching the film, as much as it hurt me, it was just almost like a work of art, how well they executed play after play. And with the Bills defense, you mentioned it that, traps work great against like these, type of penetrating defenses. The Bills defense is almost like a microcosm of NFL defenses today that are built to stop the pass. They go light box. They go with lighter personnel with nickel. They go and disguise coverage. They run too high. They want to one gap. They want to penetrate. With how cyclical the NFL is and how much of a copycat league it is, do you think you'll start to see this kind of offense, whether it's this particular type of running attack or running in general? Do you think it's going to start to make a comeback now as more and more defenses are built to stop the pass and seemingly at a disadvantage against running games like this?
That's a great point. And it's a point that I've been making a lot of this season, is that teams are generally chasing whoever's at the top. So at the top, the last few years, especially in the AFC, are the Chiefs. So you got to build your defense to defend them. When I was in the league, we were all chasing New England. And for part of my career, it was Hernandez and Gronk were the toughest matchup, because you had 2 super athletic tight ends who were big. So you needed athletic linebackers and you needed safeties that could cover. So a lot of your draft capital, a lot of your free agents went into bringing those types of guys in. Back in the day, it was base 3-4 to stop these big running backs, the Corey Dillons of this division, the Marshawn Lynch's. It's these big running backs you got to stop. And so, yes, you're right. And it's all cyclical. And you hear Sean McDermott say it all the time, but there's fundamental things that win football games, and it's being good with your hands. It's winning with technique and playing to your strengths. You only have so much money under the salary cap. I know I'm not earth-shattering information here, but you only have so much money under the salary cap. When you draft a guy like Josh Allen, he's got that arm talent. Yes, you're going to have more of a passing attack, and that's fine. But as we've been seeing lately, you need some element of the run game to keep defenses honest, because even as many weapons as Kansas City has, as great as Patrick Mahomes is, teams are starting to figure them out too. So to your point, yes, this Bills defense is built more on speed and finesse than it is strictly on power. But I will say this: when you take the 2 most physically imposing defensive players for the Bills out of this game, it changes a lot. And when you take Star Lotulelei, who, if I'm an offensive lineman going against the Bills, the most physically imposing, maybe not the best, but the most physically imposing is Star Lotulelei in the middle. The second most physically imposing guy on the defense is the 6'5", 250-pound linebacker.
Pterodactyl.
Whose arms are extremely long. He plays physical. That's the second. You take both those guys out of the lineup, that makes a big difference. And I'm not saying it was the biggest factor. And I'll just make one more point while we're on the subject of this Colts run game. Yeah. If you turn the ball over and you play from behind against a team like this was our MO under Greg Roman. We just got to get the lead, and we will just pound people to death. Now, the problem is you get a team that's built like this, and you get down 14 points, let's say you turn the ball over early or the other team scores quick, now it's harder to recover. So I'm not overly concerned about a rematch against the Colts at any point or the Titans. Honestly, I'm truly not. The Bills just can't turn the ball over like they did against the Colts. And then, you give me, I think the Bills probably win 8 or 9 out of 10 against the Titans. Titans played a really good game on Monday Night Football. Give them credit. Bills made a couple mistakes at the end and lose the game.
Yeah, and you talk about getting them out of their script. Like, you got to have an offense. The Bills' offense, you can't turn the ball over. You got to obviously put some points on the board. And I thought Anthony and I talked about this the last few days after the game. Is the Bills were actually in good shape. Yeah, they gave up those 14 points early, but then they go down and get a touchdown. And in the second quarter, they held Jonathan Taylor for 10 carries for, I think he averaged like 3.3 yards per carry in the second quarter. So they made those adjustments. They settled in, but then those turnovers, some of those, penalties became, started to rack up. And then the fumble really kind of ended the game, in my opinion. So when you talk about the Colts offense and these trap and wham plays, we saw the touchdown against Harrison Phillips where he was wham blocked there off the edge there. Here's another play in the first quarter. It was a second drive. It's a 2nd and 10 situation at the 43-yard line. The ball's on the left hash. The Colts have a tight end off the line of scrimmage to the left side of the screen on this play, and they're in shotgun. And usually, I remember you guys ran this against the Cardinals. Shady cut off of the trap or kick out by Incognito off the right side there years ago and scored a touchdown from like 25, 30 yards out. But honestly, this trap type call, it's usually, like you said, run from under center. So this is kind of a different look. And they catch Ed Oliver at the line of scrimmage right here, Eric. You see the block by Doyle. And Anthony, you mentioned it, man. Doyle had a really good game, especially on these plays, right?
Yeah, it was beautiful. Jonathan Taylor's going to get all the credit because of the touchdowns and the performance, and rightfully so to a degree. And Quentin Nelson gets the shine, but Jack Doyle was an MVP in this game, just constantly trapping, blocking down, leading to misdirection for the defense, leading to confusion, drawing safeties and corners out of position with his split flow action and routes to the outside. In addition to the blocking, he had a tremendous game for Indianapolis.
Yeah, and Eric, you mentioned it. You said, they were missing Edmonds and Starr. Like, this was huge. AJ Klein's filled in really well. He's making plays. He's making some of those splash plays. But this is a play where you see the alley that they created with that, that wham block. And you see AJ Klein up the middle trying to sift through the trash. And really, he's the only guy that has a shot on this play to make a play on Jonathan Taylor. But you're talking Jonathan Taylor with his speed, and AJ Klein, while he is a veteran and he can see things ahead of time, probably a little quicker than Tremaine Edmonds, honestly, but he doesn't have that athleticism or the length. And you see how that affects a guy like AJ Klein on this play, Eric.
Yeah, it truly does. And this is an interesting concept, just going back to the beginning. So many times, if you run trap out of the shotgun, you want them to think it's a pass. So you get in the shotgun. So here, if we were running trap, I would block back on the nose guard, and the right guard would pull and trap Ed Oliver, and it'd be a play up the middle. Honestly, you rarely ever see a wham play out of the shotgun. This is likely game plan specific for the Bills, and it's a really tough read for that defensive tackle here, because you are not thinking, when you see a guy pull away from you, you're thinking that Nelson is going to run, based upon this look, some type of trap power scheme going the other way. Generally, it's with a running back offset left. It's a play going back across the formation to the right. Here, it's a total tendency breaker, and he cuts it back off of Doyle. And, we talked about, how do you stop these types of plays? Well, it's play recognition, and then you got to defeat blocks. And here, you have 3 great blocks at the point of attack, and then you get a hole like that. They also caught the Bills in a nickel pressure here.
Yeah.
And so they're bringing pressure off the nickel.
And
so now Poyer's flying back to the middle of the field, when if they weren't bringing a pressure here, then Poyer might be sitting right in the hole there. And, that's a 5-yard play. This is kind of I don't want to say it's luck, but this is a fortunate call for the Colts based upon this pressure.
Yeah, and it felt like, Anthony and I were talking about it, it felt like Frank Reich and his offense were just always a step ahead. And, that comes down to game planning. As you said, this seemed very game plan specific. I watched 5 games of this offense, and there was only one time I've seen this play. It was against the Jets, but even I missed it going through all of their run game film. So yes, it's a different look, and as you said, the D line specifically at Oliver is not expecting that. But let me ask you this: as a former offensive lineman, from your perspective, like what are you doing differently on a trap or a wham play that maybe you could share if you're in the defensive line room? Like, what should they look for? What should they be keying on that maybe like, hey, maybe it's this, the width of the guard or tackle, or some stance, some different look where the eyes are. Like, is there anything that you could tell as an offensive lineman to help a defensive lineman on how to recognize this a little quicker?
Well, obviously, everybody's different, and every team is different, and you want each play to look uniform, or else it's going to be tough. Anytime a guard is backed up further off the football, it's generally so that they can pull, so that they can clear the center. Well, if you have a team that pulls a lot, like we did when we had Greg Roman, well, we backed our guards up all the time so that it was never an issue. Yes, that hurts you a little bit in the zone game because your combinations can be a little off kilter, but we would just always back up so that the defensive tackles couldn't get a read on who was pulling. And then you got to be on your keys, because you got to know going into a game, okay, if a guy is pulling away, okay, now going back to that original play that we were talking about here, Jack Doyle's hipped off the tackle. If he's in the line of scrimmage, there's no chance of a wham here. If he's hipped off, now you have the element where you could have some type of wham play. But honestly, in looking at this play even closer, Eric, when you have Ryan Kelly blocking back on Milano here, that is an influence block. So he's blocking back. Milano's keys tell him to get over the top of Ryan Kelly. Like, that's his key there. Well, Milano fights it like he should, and then Jonathan Taylor's out the back door.
Yeah.
This is a great play call. And like I said, all of it changes if Poyer on the snap doesn't have to run back to the middle of the field based upon the field pressure coming from the nickel.
Right. Yeah. No, these plays, especially those explosive plays, were just absolutely special. I mean, great game plan. And then the execution was just flawless, especially in those, like, again, those first two drives when they're still kind of in that script. It was amazing. So we're going to move on to the next play here, and we're going to show a little of the next gen dots here. And this is the 40-yarder by the Colts here off the right side of the offensive line. Ball's on the right hash, and you see Oliver shoot upfield and break it for 40 yards. Jonathan Taylor breaks it for 40 yards, breaks a tackle from Poyer, and gets up the sideline on a big gain. This was when it was a second. I think it was let me see. I just went back past it. It was 24-7 at this point, 6:24 on the clock at 1st and 10 situation in the third quarter. So we're halfway through the third quarter. And like I said, in that second quarter, they actually did a decent job. But this is when really the gates kind of opened up, right, Anthony?
Yeah, this one was just so killer, and it was another example of, I think a lot of, Eric, you and I were talking about it offline. I think a lot of people after this game were sitting there thinking, well, the Bills didn't adjust, and they did throughout the game. You mentioned how successful they were in the second quarter, but they tried throwing different things against the Colts as the game progressed. And on that particular play there, that 40-yard gain on that trap for Taylor, the Bills are sitting there in man coverage. So they changed what they were doing. They come up, they crowd the line of scrimmage, and they put Tre'Davious White down in man coverage on Doyle. Doyle goes across the formation in a split flow action. Trey follows him and goes hard with him across. Milano, his eyes, he's lined up on Mo Alley Cox. He's got him in man coverage as well. And when Trey flows across that formation, that entire left side is now vacated. There's no more contain. There's no more force there. Milano gets caught inside because his eyes go to Mo Alley Cox right away. And the next thing when he looks inside, he gets blocked up. And it was just another thing where we talked about the Colts kind of being one step ahead. It seemed like whenever the Bills tried to counter what the Colts were doing, it was like the Colts were ready for that counter. They'd be like, okay, cool. You want to go with two guys in the A gap? We got you. Okay, you guys want to come up and play more man-to-man and try and gap out that way? Cool. We have something for that. It was a beautiful game plan. And honestly, it was super unfortunate that it came against the Bills, but it was just really well done from Indianapolis again.
So, Eric, let me ask you this then. With this 40-yard play, we saw Ed Oliver shoot up the field. And, I said after the game, I'm like, Ed Oliver has to be frustrated because every time he rushes the passer and actually gets a sack, it hasn't counted. So I'm sure there's some frustration built up in Ed Oliver because he is really working hard and has played really well and a lot more consistent this year. But what were some things that maybe defensive coordinators do to kind of slow down these trap plays when you have a guy like Ed Oliver, again, shooting up the field? I'll show it again. Like, he almost takes the handoff on this play from Wentz there. It just, what are some things that, defensive coordinators can do to kind of slow this down but still have their guys be aggressive? Because we know Leslie Frazier wants his scheme to be aggressive. He wants those penetrators like Ed Oliver.
Yeah, I mean, what teams will do is they'll cheat their linebackers up because ultimately, like if you watch Eric Fisher on this play, the left tackle of the Colts, he's got to get inside of AJ Klein. That's a tough assignment. So he's trying to cut him off on the backside. And if AJ Klein reads this correctly, and I understand it's a tough scheme because he's thinking he's blocking down on him. But if he just flows left, then he's essentially unblocked. Milano the same. And then again, you have Micah Hyde coming off the slot here. So Jordan Poyer's rocking back. If Jordan Poyer's not rocking back there to the middle of the field, now you have him down there as well. So fast, hard penetration can stop these. If Ed Oliver, he's inches away from making that play, and then if the offensive coordinator, if you're at home, he's getting booed. You know what I mean? And so you're inches away from that happening, and instead nothing happens. The Jerry Hughes is on the left-hand side of our screen. He almost defeats the block of the tight end. He can make that play in the backfield. But generally speaking, when there's almost a guy that makes a play like Ed Oliver does there, whenever you get past him, it's generally a bigger play because there's a tremendous separation between the defensive line and the linebackers. And so here it's just a combination of guys not defeating blocks. So yes, from a schematic standpoint, you could cheat those linebackers down a little bit. You can move the front. You can slant and angle a little bit, which can make those trap blocks a lot tougher. You can stem the front at the last second. So by stem, you could switch the alignments of your defensive linemen because those are a nightmare in man scheme blocking because at the very last second, if Ed Oliver shifts down to a 2-eye and Harrison Phillips shifts out to a 3, now everyone's way off kilter.
Yep.
Like if I'm a center, now I have to re-ID this whole thing if you're in the middle of the cadence. So that's another way that you can try and combat that. But here, if you're Tre'Davious White, you got to go down with the tight end. Do you have to fly that hard with Doyle? Maybe if you're trying to make a play on the other side of the field and it's a bootleg, which I'm sure he was thinking. But good offensive coordinators, they mirror everything together.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Same.
So everything's going to mirror itself to where that's a really tough deal. I said with Milano and Klein here, like they're both out leveraged on the play from the offensive lineman and they work back into the block. Well, that's because on other plays, those guys will be blocking down on them and they have to go back over the top.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. That's true. And, I'm going to throw this clip in, Eric, just because, eventually they fought, force with force. So they tried doing it again later in the game, 2 tight end set here. And you see Doyle off the line of scrimmage here, trying to execute that wham or trap right here. And you see Ed Oliver, he immediately recognizes it on this play and he fights force with force. He took the fight to Doyle on this play and he blew up the block and then blew up Jonathan Taylor in the backfield here. That's what Eric was talking about. Like, yes, get that penetration, but also recognize it and take a proper angle to blow it up. And that's when you will get the boos for the opposing offensive coordinator. So yeah, Ed Oliver got it, eventually, but it was almost too little, too late, as we see on this play. And so the last play we want to break down with you, Eric, is the duo call. And this was towards the end of the game, one of Taylor's touchdowns here. Anthony, you want to take this away?
Yeah, so we're sitting here 1st and 10 at the Bills 10-yard line, 5 minutes, 27 seconds left in the third quarter, and Taylor's going to score another touchdown here on this duo call. And this is funny. So this is even some of the things that Eric Wood, you were just mentioning, the Bills, they shift a little bit inside on this. Wentz motions Doyle in, Doyle comes in line a little bit, and Ed Oliver shrinks down, so now they've got a double A gap look. Klein kicks in a little bit. Mario Addison kicks in a little bit, and it ends up working directly to the Colts' favor. And this is also another thing we mentioned earlier, too. This was an adjustment from the Bills. When you're looking at this play, it's a completely loaded box. Almost every single Buffalo Bill on defense is in this tiny frame that we're looking at. They're trying to take away. Yeah, they're 1,000% gapped out. They're trying to take away every single angle. And the snap happens. Taylor takes that false step to his right. Milano goes with him and almost puts himself out of position. Ed Oliver crosses his face, so Milano then exchanges and goes into that B gap. And we see AJ Klein, Taron Johnson on the outside, both get washed down inside. And Eric Wood, this is something you mentioned earlier, what the Colts were doing, setting up those plus matchups where now you've got Jonathan Taylor one-on-one against Levi Wallace in a situation that, no disrespect to Levi, is very, very advantageous for Taylor to win.
Yeah, so if you guys remember 2 years ago against the Giants, when Saquon had that long run early in the game and had that touchdown, this is the exact play. And the reason you often put wham plays and track plays on a check with me, where you can switch that call at the line, is so, like I was saying, if you switch the front too early, or if you get up to the line of scrimmage, like this is not a good wham or trap look, because who are you going to wham here? Mm-hmm. The guard can't go past the left guard can't go past the 2-eye, so it's not going to be a great wham look. I'm not sure, and I'm not going to give them too much credit here, but a lot of times you'll then just convert that down to duo, because now you do have everyone out leveraged to go that way, and you're leaving, like I mentioned earlier. So now you got the quarterback and the running back, they're out. So now you have 9 blockers, and then you have 11 defenders. So who are they going to leave unblocked? Levi Wallace and Micah Hyde here. Yep. And yes, you got to give the Colts credit because they are blocking and executing. Ultimately, how do you defeat these plays? You block, you execute, you fill the hole quickly. If they do get you and get to your second level, that guy's got to make the play. Now it's on everybody else to squeeze down that hole. Even if you're not defeating the block, squeeze the hole to make that an easier tackle. Now, the best thing the Bills did against the Giants in that Saquon game was that corner who's left on an island out there, he would go and close the distance immediately. Yeah. So not give him 10 yards of room on the outside, maybe only give him 2 yards of wiggle room, and then you like your matchup a lot better there. But it's another good play call. It may be fortunate, maybe not. Maybe Carson Wentz checked to that one, but Levi Wallace is unblocked on the outside. Play recognition, go make that play in the backfield.
Eric, you mentioned if the Bills play the Colts, 10 times, 8 or 9 out of those 10, you'd be confident in the Bills winning that matchup. And one of those things, related to that was, potentially Star Lotulelei returning. So we know how successful Jonathan Taylor was. Another fun little stat. He had 11 carries for 54 yards against 8+ man fronts against the Bills. So even when the Bills tried to load the box, they weren't successful. And, we talked about these trap runs and the whams and the gaps where the Bills were just physically beaten. Was this game just kind of perfect storm of, everything going wrong for the Bills? Or is it as simple as, Star Lotulelei returning back and Tremaine Edmonds coming back that helps this defense? Or is there something schematically or personnel-wise that the Bills need to adjust when it comes to facing offenses like this?
Well, I like how you said a fun stat.
Yeah, but depending on how you're looking at it.
And honestly, so 11 for 54, so that's under 5 a carry on the season. He averages well over 5 a carry. So it's like, that wasn't that bad. The problem is when you give up those chunk plays, and that's what you got to avoid. And that's where your secondary's got to fill those gaps a little quicker. And I know it's easier said than done. You're sitting here listening to an offensive lineman talk about it. I'm not saying I could make those plays, but you close those gaps down and you make those play closer to the line of scrimmage. Anyways, when I'm analyzing this matchup with Star and Tremaine out, it makes it a tougher matchup, especially because if you are going to run base personnel, you'd like to have AJ Klein be your third linebacker. They go to tremendous inexperience if they bring Dotson or Andre Smith off the bench to kind of fill into that next linebacker role there. And so that being said, personnel-wise, I think you could see some larger personnel and, more base defense against a 12 personnel, especially against, Mo Alley Cox and Jack Doyle. Those aren't necessarily your big time receiving threat tight ends.
Right.
And so I think you could start seeing some more base personnel from the Bills. There might be some stemming of the front. But that being said, I think it was a perfect storm. I think when you turn the ball over early against a team like that, and then the wind and the rain made it tough for the Bills passing attack, which that's going to be the case in Buffalo often, but it made it tough on the Bills passing attack. And that's a good team over there. And I'm with you. You guys mentioned the post game afterwards for the Colts, them giving out game balls, the way they celebrated, the way they said we talked about this all week and we owed them something. They came in like it being a Super Bowl. And I'm not saying the Bills weren't ready to play, because I was down on the field before the game, and I assure you, those guys were ready to roll. They were energetic. They were into it. This wasn't a look past the Colts. The Bills just got to realize that teams are coming in motivated each and every week. This is a team that made it to the AFC Championship game last year. A week ago, they were the odds-on betting favorite to win the Super Bowl. Teams are coming in here, and they have a target on their back, and they got to realize that. And not that they don't. They just got to understand that each and every week, teams are out for blood, and they better be ready for a fight. And like I said, I'm not saying they weren't. It's just, I know when I was playing in Buffalo, that wasn't always the case week to week when teams entered Orchard Park on a Sunday at 1. So, I'm confident going into this game against the Saints. Again, the Bills get a backup quarterback. They've made backup quarterbacks all season look very average. And, I think the Bills are going to have a big bounce back performance. And I'm confident in the Bills moving forward. I'm confident in this coaching staff to adjust to these run issues that really gave them trouble last week, mainly because the Titans game, yes, Derrick Henry ran for over 100 yards, and you can't do this in football, but if you take away the one long run, they hold him to like 3.1 yards per carry. Now, the biggest issue against the Titans in my mind was the play action. They sold out on the run.
Yeah, middle of the
play
field
action. Yeah, the play action in the second half was the key to the game for me.
And I love how you mentioned the personnel matching, because it's been a thing of contention this week among Billsmafia and the Twitter sphere, because for the longest time, since this regime came in, when you saw 12 personnel early on, it was okay. We're going to try to put a big nickel, Raphael Bush in the slot as the big nickel, instead of having a third linebacker. Then it was Saran Neal doing a little bit. And then now, halfway through last year, right around that Cardinals game, they said, you know what? Our best bet is to keep Taron Johnson on the field versus 12 personnel. And they said, we want to defend the pass. He's actually really good at filling on the run, especially in those C gaps as he's detached from the box, and then he can fly in 100 miles an hour, make those tackles, and he's willing to do that. So now with teams like New Orleans, who maybe employ some fullback, an extra tight end, especially in New England, we talked about that this entire offseason, especially leading into the draft, about, hey, they're going to see 12 and 13 personnel more from that offense and probably run the ball. What are the Bills going to do? Obviously, as you said, they couldn't do that last game, having 3 linebackers on, because Edmonds was out. But that is something to keep an eye on going forward, right? Because if you're having teams that want to get in that 12 and 13 personnel but run it, then that third linebacker may comes in, but it could hurt them too, because some of those tight ends on these teams that we're going to see going forward are really good pass catchers, and that really is going to be a bind that this defense and Leslie Frazier is going to really have to figure out as we move forward in the season.
Yeah, I agree. And outside of George Kittle and probably Gronk at this point, assuming he still blocks the way he did in New England, besides those two guys, there's not that many that can do it all. You know what I mean? Yeah. So when I mentioned that Doyle and Mo Alley Cox, yes, they're capable pass catchers, but they are not dynamic weapons where Milano can't cover one of them.
Right.
So moving forward, yes, there's guys like Gronk and George Kittle that give you a matchup nightmare if you're going to put base personnel on the field, but not everybody will. And, I think when the Bills lack size across their defensive line, sometimes maybe putting in an extra linebacker could help them. But it's been rare cases that I've ever felt like Taron Johnson needs to come off the field because he is so physical. So
good. He might be one of their best players this entire year, right? I mean, he's been that good.
Yes, he's one of the best players on the field, period, for the
Yeah.
Bills. He's an excellent ball player.
All right. So, Erik, we appreciate you joining us in the film room. But before we get you out of here, obviously, we want to have you back. We want to get your info, man. When are your podcasts dropping? Where can people find your content? Where can people find you during the week as far as what you got going on with the Bills and everything, man? Where can we find you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I call the games on Sundays for the Bills. I'm on the radio broadcast. What's Next with Erik Wood is my podcast. They release on Wednesdays. And then I'm on Twitter and Instagram at ewood70. I respond a little more frequently on Instagram to the messages because on Twitter, the only verified or people I follow can contact me. So I enjoy conversing with people on Instagram. So hit me up on there at ewood70.
Erik, man, we appreciate you joining us in the film room, and we're gonna do this again, man. It's it's been too long, man. It's been a couple of years now. We appreciate you joining us, brother. You take care.
Yep, my pleasure. You guys do a heck of a job.
Thanks, E.
Thanks, Erik.
Yep, happy Thanksgiving.
You too, man.
You too, man.
Man, it's always fun talking with him, man. Like I said, one of my first film rooms, especially with a player, was with Erik Wood when I was with the Athletic. When I first started with the Athletic, I did a film room with him and Zoe at the same time, same week, and it was just it's mind-boggling. And someone said it in the chat, the memory on players is just ridiculous, dude. Like how you can recall some of these things and some of those stories, man. Some awesome work from him on those breakdowns, and great insight from him, man.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always so cool to get someone's take that has played at that level and who knows the game in that detail. Because I think, the type of analysis and coverage that we give is very X's and O's driven and detail driven. And when we can get that insight for the people who consume that content, it just furthers that level of analysis and explanation that we're trying to give. And yeah, he was tremendous. And he's so personable too. It's one thing to know what you're talking about, but if you can't deliver it in a way that people want to hear, it's not engaging and people aren't going to consume it. And yeah, he ticks a lot of the boxes, and he was awesome. And you probably like him even more because you guys have the same name, even though it's spelled a little different. So
Erik with a C though, man, it's a little different. He's obviously a great resource for us at Cover One, man. Anytime I have offensive line questions or I see a technique that I hadn't seen really in a long time or ever, he's a guy I always hit up. And so we appreciate him joining us in the film room today. So as you guys know, it was rough. Some of those explosive runs, they were just like you said, perfect storm. Just looked so game planned and so detailed, and really caught some of the Bills' best players off guard and out of position. I mean, they had 14 missed tackles in this game, man. It was very reminiscent, as I sent you a link from the Eagles game a few years ago, where the Bills had 12 missed tackles in that game. Like the run scheme just married so well. It was so complex, and I can only imagine what the film room was like for the position coaches and players in the game. You heard, the pressers after practice early in the week was that guys were angry. The mood was somber. Like, you guys got to realize you're in the room with your peers and guys in your position or on the defensive side of the ball, and you're getting ripped to shreds for being really bad. Yeah, you're not going to be happy about that. I'm sorry, guys. Like, you guys think that they are not showing enough emotion. Well, you're not seeing that emotion, and that emotion comes in the film room. I know a lot of fans just want to see it played out on the field a little more. And you saw that clip from Ed Oliver. He was pissed after he got trapped a few different times, and so he took the fight to them. That's what we want to see when teams want to go to this run game, man.
Yeah, just to touch on those film room pieces, that's super awkward. Yeah, like for everyone, like imagine you get like a performance review every week, and your performance review comes with the entire like staff, and your manager is telling you like you suck and here's why, and everyone's just like listening to him tell you why you suck. It can be rough. But yeah, the Colts really just hit on everything. It was designed to. I love how Erik with a C mentioned that wham look out of the shotgun and how that seemed almost more game plan specific for the Buffalo Bills, because that's not a traditional look that you would run with that type of play. And I think that highlights the overall message of the Colts really just attacked the Bills in ways to use to attack their weaknesses, but also use their strengths against them. These traps and these whams are such a great way to work against a fast flowing defense, a penetrating defense, a one gap defense. And when you've got guys like Ed Oliver getting upfield fast, even he had a bad game, but Harrison Phillips is a guy who's been getting penetration week after week. They used that inside penetration against the Bills time and time again, drilled home on it and executed. And I think from the emotion piece too, you saw Ed show a lot of emotion when he got that first sack that ended up being called back. But these guys, they care. And I know maybe, to Eric's point, Eric with C again, that the Colts may have wanted it a little bit more, and everything you saw in the post-game locker room stuff showed how much this game meant to them. But the Bills are definitely bringing the effort, and maybe they're not getting up for the game as much as their opponent, but they need to. But that emotion is still there. You're just always not going to see it in that press conference moment, and especially again from a team led by Sean McDermott, where they kind of keep everything close to the vest and don't really speak on things like that.
Yeah, you just jogged my memory when you're talking about Eric Wood and how he said that shotgun trap look was, it's a tendency. It's not really a normal look for that trap.
Breaker.
Yeah, it's a tendency breaker. It reminded me of the film room I did with Jordan Poyer last year after the win against the Colts. And it was more of a somber type breakdown because they were getting beat on those drive concepts, those mesh concepts. So we broke that down. But going into that game, they ran inside zone, as Eric talked about. Usually that running back he was offset to the left. They would run inside zone with that, with the tight end off the line of scrimmage. The tendency going into that game last year in the playoffs was if that tight end was on the line of scrimmage, it was going to be duo out of shotgun. So having that tight end off the line of scrimmage, it was more of an inside zone tendency, which is why you saw Ed Oliver kind of penetrate into his gap and slant and then realize, oh my goodness, I'm getting trapped here. I'm getting wham blocked here. So that really just jogged my memory on that, because that was a tendency going into that game last year against the Colts. So again, so much goes into these game plans. So much is riding on a game plan, on a script for a team that is relies on their run game. They can't get down. They cannot get behind on the scoreboard, because then it takes them out of that script and out of that nuance and detail of that complex run game, man. I love this stuff. It was a somber film room breakdown, but it's still, after watching this, it's like therapy for us. Film junkies like us love watching this, because first of all, we're not in the room, and getting ripped to shreds, for screwing up. But, seeing the why, deconstructing what went wrong here and what they can do to change things is really why we do these film rooms week in and week out. So Anthony, let's get out of here, man. Again, another good breakdown, good stuff with Eric, and we're going to see who we can get next couple weeks, probably after the holidays for the film room. But let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and what content you got dropping this week.
Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. It's in the little bottom left hand of my screen right here. You can find me here with Mr. Eric Turner as the co-host of the Cover One Film Room every Tuesday live at 7 p.m. You can find me as the host of Disguised Coverage live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. You can find me as one of the 3 co-hosts, along with Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn, of the Cover One postgame, going live after any and every Buffalo Bills game. And you also can find me as one of the 3 co-hosts of the Cover One Fantasy Football Show with Mr. Greg Thompson and Mr. Rich Haynes.
No, appreciate it, man. The workhorse of Cover One. I'm glad to have you, man. You've been kicking butt this year and the last couple years. We're proud of your work, man. All right, guys. Until next week, we're trying to figure out what day we're gonna roll with the film room. Obviously the holidays with Thanksgiving coming up, and we're gonna see. Probably might try a Sunday night or a Monday night breakdown, but we'll see how the Bills do. Hopefully, it's not a fallout like it was this past Monday after the game. So hopefully the Bills get a big W down in New Orleans against the Saints. I mean, everything's teed up perfectly for them to do so. So let's hope they get a win so that we can have an up film room next weekend. So as we said, that's Anthony Prohaska from Disguised Coverage. I'm Eric Turner. We'll see you next week.